Oh, yes, I can. Right there is great.
Hello everyone, I want to welcome you to our presentation tonight from Dr. Matatel from the U of L. We're glad you can be here and hopefully you will learn some things that help you as you parent your children and support their learning here at the school. So this is Dr. Chris Matatel. He's a professor in the Faculty of Education at the U of L. He teaches educational psychology and cognitive psychology at the undergraduate and graduate levels. He is currently conducting research in how classroom teachers teach reading in elementary schools. On July 1st, he will be celebrating 12,000 days of marriage to his wife Gloria, which is 33 years. He has 3 grown sons and 1 granddaughter named Elliot, as well as a mischievous Bernedoodle named Winston. So this is Dr. Matatel. Thanks for coming to us.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, no, you don't talk. No. I am glad to be here because I absolutely love speaking to parent groups. I kind of wish I had somebody speak to me about how my kids' brains worked when I was a new dad. I usually start these sessions actually with some terrible mistakes that I've made as a parent, but there's so many. I could speak all night about all the mistakes that I've made, and I won't go there, but I will say this. I can tell you that I am not a parenting authority or an expert in parenting where you could look to me and say, you are a good parent. I've made more mistakes than I care to admit, and I think we're all like that, right? But I love my sons and I love my granddaughter, and so I always try to do what is best for my children, just like you are. That's why you're here. So for those that are online, there's about 8,000 people here. I know you can't see the crowd, but there's a great number of people here. You can hear them. But welcome, and I'm glad to have you join us. And so if I lose you or I do something off screen, just realize I'm doing something with a video or something of that nature. Now hopefully you can see the screen pretty well. So I will say this as we get started. This is pretty low key, so it's not meant to be really like a lecture or anything like that. It's meant to be like a discussion, like a chat, okay? And I want you to feel relaxed, and I want you to feel part of what we're going to talk about. If you wish, my website, goodteaching.ca, has a lot of the resources that we use and a lot of books on there, a lot of articles on there, and things that you can look up later for a resource if you care to. And I usually put these presentations on the website, so you can also go and see it on there. And I also know we're going to have it available for you afterwards as well. So goodteaching.ca if you want. I only have one ground rule. Anytime I do a presentation, I do have one rule, and here it is. I really want you to ask questions. Don't wait until the end, and same with if you're online and you have a question, you can either unmute and say, hey, I got a question, because there's no such thing as an interruption. This is your time, not my time. And so I really want you to ask questions or to input something into our conversation, because it's like the diagram. It's like cogs in our head. You may say something or ask something that gets somebody else thinking and an idea moving that actually causes change to where we go. I don't really care if we go through all what I have prepared. I only care that we do what you really want to do. So if you have a question and it takes us somewhere, that's fine, okay? That's the ground rule. So ask questions at any time, interject at any time. It's not an interruption. It's part of the whole evening. Okay, is that good? Great. So we're going to start here, and I want to read something to you that might be surprising. Daniel Willingham is my favorite all-time educational psychologist. He's a brilliant mind, and he wrote this book, and this is one of many books of his, Why Don't Students Like School? And what he does is he comes from the perspective of how children learn, how children think, and why don't they like school. But let me read something to you that might be surprising. Contrary to popular belief, the brain is not designed for thinking. It's designed to save you from having to think. Because the brain is actually not very good at thinking. You know what it's like. We all prefer this fast type of thinking, this intuition, this type of thinking where we can actually react. That's what our brains like to do. It doesn't like this slow, laborious thinking because that's effortful. And our brain actually doesn't like effortful thinking. It also doesn't like confusion. However, as he continues, people do enjoy mental work if it is successful. I love that. People love to do things if they're successful. Listen, here's the truth about motivation. Success determines motivation, not the other way around. So if we really want children to be successful, or motivated rather, we need to make them successful. We have to make sure that they're learning, make sure they're doing well. We can't motivate them to learn things that they don't yet know. We have to teach them those things so that they're successful. That motivates them to be more successful. So that's a little bit of him. And it might be a surprise to you that the brain does not like to think. And not only does it not like to think, it does not like confusion, which is very important. Ambiguity is the enemy of the human brain. We are curious, but the brain is always trying to figure out what's happening. It's always curious, always trying to figure it out. If it doesn't have the answer, it will fill in the blanks on its own. Let me demonstrate. This is an image of a group of children holding a turtle, getting the picture taken. Now, from where you're seated, it looks like a color photograph, but it's actually a black and white photograph, and only 5% of this image has color on it in the form of a very thin line, very thin grid, which you can probably see from your seat. But when you look at it, your brain is actually saying that's a color photograph, and the longer you look at it, and especially when you back up, you can't see the grid as well, but your brain tells you that's a color photograph. It looks like it on the screen.
Yeah, it looks online, it totally is colored.
Yeah, but that's actually because your brain wants to make sense of this diagram, and so it fills in those empty blanks. Your brain is always doing that, especially during sleep. It's trying to make sense of what you learned during the day. That's probably why your dreams are so wild, is because it's reorganizing and structuring things that you learned during the day. Now I'm going to show you a short clip, and I want you to listen carefully to this soccer chant to see if you know what they're saying. Watch what happens.
The sentence as being. That is embarrassing. That's what I got too. So, are you sure you don't hear rotating pirate ships? Or do you hear that isn't my receipt?
This is the power of suggestion.
Just maybe you're hearing Bart Simpson bouncing. And then the lobsters in motion.
Surely not. Just out of a casual chat chance, eh?
So what's happening there? Have you seen this before? There's now 13. Yeah, don't turn it off. There's now 13 of these sayings that they have applied to this video. I'll see if I can advance that. Yeah, well, okay, we'll leave it there. There's now 13 of those separate chants or separate sayings. What's happening is, could you hear it say the same when the words are up there? Bart Simpson bouncing, that isn't my receipt. It's actually a soccer chant, and if I didn't have any of the words on there, do you think you could have known what it said? So that ambiguity, our brain is willing to accept what somebody else implies is said. Now there's several of these, you can see them online. There's one with green needle, you might have seen that one, where there's two totally opposite words, and whatever sentence you look at, that's what your brain actually hears. What's happening is your brain is confused. And so it is willing to accept what somebody else tells it. Now right away you can tell that there's danger there. When there's ambiguity among our children, they are susceptible to accepting what somebody else tells them. There's a danger in that. A famous 1968 study at Columbia University. Now universities are a place where kids go or young people go, and they want to explore the world, they want to think, they want to be advocates, or they want to be environmentalists and so forth. And as you know, there's a lot going on at Columbia University right now, among many universities like Stanford and other places. But in 1968, a very famous experiment was done at Stanford University where they invited a group of people to come and talk about urbanization, the effect that urbanization is having on America. Now this is back in 1968. So a lot of students said, yeah, I want to talk about that. So they came to the university, to this study, and they said, sign me up. And they said, okay, what you have to do first is you have to fill out a survey. They said, okay, fine. Now, they were tricking the students. The study was not about urbanization in America. It was about how students reacted while they were filling out the survey. So they brought them to a small room, about a fifth of the size of this one. It had a desk in it, survey on the desk with one chair, and a window that had a one-way window in it. And the researchers were watching the students. They would invite the student in, tell them to walk down the hall to office 3A, go in, fill out the survey. So while these individuals sat down to fill out the survey, on a desk about this size, smoke started to billow in a grate that was on the wall. White smoke. The students saw the smoke, and what do you think they did? 75% of those students called out and said, hey, there's smoke coming in here, and it was actually starting to pour, but it didn't smell like fire, so it created a little ambiguity. You know, a little confusion. Like, oh, is it safe? What's happening? There's smoke coming in here, 75%. 50% of them actually got up out of their chair, went to the door, opened the door, and called for help, saying, there's smoke in here, what's going on? 50% to 75%. Then the researchers wanted to see what happened if they had groups of 3 students in the same room filling out the survey at a time. They wanted to find out what would happen. Do you think it would increase or decrease the likelihood that they would seek help? Decrease. That's exactly what happened. In fact, only 1 out of 24 got up and called for help. What was happening? The smoke, in fact, the smoke was so thick at one point they couldn't even see each other, and nobody would get up and move. Here's what they did. In the face of ambiguity, when other people are doing nothing, you think, okay, we use our social groups to determine if we should be alarmed and do something. Nobody moved. We see this phenomenon happening all through society. Nobody helps other people. Nobody gets alerted to a guy who goes and seems to steal a guy's car. We don't seem to be alerted because nobody else is doing anything. Here's the problem. Smoke is pouring in the room, especially around social media, and we're looking around to see if anybody's doing anything, but nobody's doing anything, and so it must be okay, and so we do nothing. This actually happens in a lot of social circumstances. Yeah.
That happened in Fort McMurray recently.
Yeah.
The ones that were not told to evacuate, they evacuated and joined the group as the peer was moving that way.
That's exactly right.
That is,
And so what's really happening, you think of our children, it happens from birth. If our children aren't aware of something, they will, because they don't know what to do, they will look to their social group, or to their parents, or to their teachers. And so that's a little bit about what tonight's about. It's about how the brain thinks and reacts. And this is a very important experiment because there's a lot of ambiguity in life. There's a lot of ambiguity. And so what we have to be aware of is the power of peer pressure. So I'm going to actually talk about 3 things tonight, but I'm going to start here because I want you to see how important social development is. Now, this guy, Erik Erikson, was a very famous Harvard professor who was actually talking about psychosocial stages of development. In other words, how we actually progress, our minds progress as we grow older. And I'm only going to mention 2 of those stages. And the first one, which represents some of your children, are the ages of 6 to 12, industry versus inferiority. And what he's saying is this: there's always this tension that happens as we go through these stages. The first tension is children who, as they start to grow older, they want to be good at stuff. So they get around the age, grade 1, grade 2, and they start to recognize whether or not they're good at something, that's the industry part, whether or not they've got strong skills in sports, or reading, or mathematics, and they start to compare themselves with others, and whether they see themselves as capable, industrious, or inferior. It starts very early where children start to compare themselves with others. Comparison is the thief of joy. But it is ramped up and starts as part of our human nature where we start to say, am I good? Can I do it? Am I capable? Am I a good reader? Am I a good student? What happens before this age? You know what children are like. They're like, I'm a great singer. I'm the world's best artist. I'm really good at this, right? You've heard our children do this. I was at a parent session here recently in Champion. No, I'm sorry, it's Stavely. And a little girl came in with her mother, and she was singing. And she was about 4 years old. And I said, are you a good singer? She says, I'm a terrific singer. And she sang for me. And then she sat down with her mom, and her mom brought out some stuff and crayons and stuff just before we started. And I said to her, are you a good artist? She said, I'm a terrific artist, right? Nobody had ever taught her otherwise. But as they start to develop and they start to compare themselves to others, then they start to ask the questions, am I capable or am I inferior? Now that's sad for a parent, but that's reality, that's the way it works. Then they get to the next stage, which is identity versus role confusion. You know what this is like. As they start getting in the teen years, they start asking, who am I? As their intellectual abilities become more complex, they start to push back about what they were told, and they start to say, do my parents really know the answers? Are they right? Is my religion correct? Are my beliefs correct? Is what I'm being taught at school a good thing? What about environmentalism? And they start becoming little adults. They're immature, but they start becoming more complex, and they start to develop their role and their identity. And that's why we have so many kids at this age who are facing role confusion. So that's where we're at. Think about everything we've talked about so far. We've talked about these stages of development, but we've also talked about the brain not liking ambiguity. And when there is ambiguity in any one of these stages, something has to lead the child. Now, we hope it's parents and teachers, right? But there are a lot of other influences out there. Now, part of this talk a little discouraging, but there's a lot of hope too. You're here because you want, and again, we see them all at different levels, right? You have one kid here and one kid here in physical maturity, and then mental maturity and emotional maturity. They're all over the map. Teachers deal with these ranges every single day. You know, teachers are heroes, really, 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 really. Here's you. You want your son or daughter to reach their full potential. That's why you're here. That's why you care. And that, I mean, there's a lot of parents who are not here tonight, but they care just as much. They just couldn't be here tonight. They want, when our child turns that tap on and they want to, you know, be their full self, be everything they can be. We want our kids to have a gushing tap. We want them to reach their full potential. But you and I know life happens, and sometimes it springs leaks, right? We don't reach our full potential because of certain things that can drain away our full potential. Do you have any ideas of what some of those could be?
Are you speaking about trauma?
Trauma is one of them.
Like traumas?
Lots of life traumas, yeah. Intergenerational trauma. Trauma that happens in an incident, like a child is hurt, or they see a fire, or they see a house burn down, or a friend's house burns down, or they lose a parent or a grandparent, or a dog, or thousands of other things that cause trauma. Is one of those things that could spring a leak in their full potential. You've seen it. In fact, we call it epigenetics, where the genes can actually be turned off. Expressions of genes can be turned off, and their personality can literally change because of toxic stress and trauma. It's a whole field of epigenetics that they actually studied at the University of Lethbridge. And so you can learn quite a bit about that and how trauma can actually change the person's personality. I know somebody who recently had a concussion, and because of that accident, people have said that their personality has changed. There has been brain damage during that concussion. What other kind of things can you imagine that can cause people not to reach their full potential?
Healthy habits, sleep,
Health.
nutrition.
Healthy habits, that's exactly right. How about their view of themselves? How they talk to themselves? If they say, I'm just stupid, I can't do anything, I'm a loser, does that affect their potential? Absolutely. What if they see themselves as never good enough? I'm not smart enough, I'm dumb, I'm stupid. That'll affect their potential. What about their mindset? They're set towards their mind. Like, how is your mind set towards learning? I could never learn that because I wasn't born smart. Or I could never be that because. With excuses in their mindset. We're going to talk a little bit about mindset tonight. How they set their mind actually has a lot to do with what kind of potential they're going to realize. Another one is their friends and influencers. Now, I spent 6 years in a maximum security prison. As a teacher, by the way, I should point that out. As a teacher. I should put that out there first. I taught in a maximum security youth prison of young offenders 12 to 18 years of age. Now, they were in there for the same crimes that adults are. Murder, pimping and everything else. Anything you can imagine, those kids did. And I used to say to my class all the time, if you really want to change the direction of your life, change the people you hang out with. So this is where parents feel guilty sometimes of steering their children away from certain influencers but I'm here to tell you it's a good thing. Show me your friends, I'll show you your future,
Yeah, that's right.
right? Now, another thing is social media. So tonight we're going to look at three things. Social media is going to be one of them. We are going to examine the effects of it and some of those other things. But I'm here to tell you also there's good news. Here's the Band-Aids, or not Band-Aids, actually patches to some of those holes. Now there are other ones, but I'm only going to mention 4. School is a tremendous patch to making sure kids reach their potential. There are a lot of things that can strip our potential or can drain our potential, but school is a very positive one. We are lucky in this country to have schooling the way we have it. There are some countries begging to have school. You can imagine the number of people who are in motion right now because of warfare and migration and everything else who don't have schooling. A lot of people don't realize this. I wish this was published more. Right now, Alberta ranks 2nd in the world in reading and writing at grade 9 level by the time they get to grade 9 on the PISA international scores. 2nd in the world. Those were just published by our government, those stats. I went on and looked myself, and sure enough, we rank 2nd in the world. I wonder how many parents know that we have a fantastic education system. Our education system actually is a safeguard against a lot of mental harms that can come to our children. Our teachers love our children. They would do anything for our kids. So school actually helps our kids reach potential. Another one are clubs and teams. Now, of course, we can go overboard with this, of course, and have them involve too many clubs. But one of the good things about clubs and teams is it does teach young people rules about winning and losing and how to play, how to be cooperative, how to work in groups, how to negotiate. There's a lot of good things. We're not going to talk about that tonight, but there's a lot of good things about clubs and teams. So if you have a child who's not very social, who's having difficulty, finding a club or a team for them might be a very positive thing. A third thing that we don't talk a lot about or enough about is sleep. You may have heard the myth, the neuromyth, that our brains work 10 to 15% of the time, like only 10 to 15% of our brain works. Absolutely not true. Your brain is actually 100% of your brain is working all the time, especially during sleep. I'm going to take a drink, sorry. We need to make sure that our kids are sleeping. We'll come back to that. And finally, family and friends. These are the 4 big areas that I put on the slide tonight that can help our kids reach their potential. Now, there's always a flip side to these. There can be some negatives to school, like bullying and things like that when kids get together. There can be negative things to having too much sleep or the way we sleep, and family and friends, of course. But generally speaking, the positive side of these, they can be very powerful to the development of the human cognitive architecture. Now, as I said, we're going to look at 3 things: social media, mindset, and inner speech. Now, I'm going to introduce a book. The first is social media, and this book is sweeping the nation. The Anxious Generation came out on March 23rd, and within 7 days was on the New York Times bestseller list because it is selling by the millions. Jonathan Haidt, who also wrote The Coddling of the American Mind, he has, if you go on the website, theanxiousgeneration.com, you will find a whole bunch of material there for parents and for educators. I don't want to spend too much time on social media, but I do want to spend enough to make sure that we understand a few key things. Especially this. Now, when I talk about social media, I'm actually talking screen time of all types of electronic devices. Researchers, and this is a research-based book, so half of the book is what he writes, and really the other half is like notes and his bibliography and the research that's been done. And he has a separate, what he calls Substack, that you can go and see all the research that they've been doing. He has quite a team built up that does this. 4 foundational harms of social media that I think every parent should know about. Number 1, sleep deprivation. How many know what vamping is? Vamping or vampiring is a new term that is when a child has their phone beside their bed at night, and they know that a friend is going to text them, and it goes, "Zzz, zzz." They reach over and they grab their phone, and they text their son or their friend or whatever, and then they put the phone back on the table. But the brain knows that there could be another message coming. So the brain does not go into a deep sleep like it should. The brain is waiting. And a lot of kids who take their phones to bed at night are not getting a good night's sleep because they're texting and they're online or they're gaming or they're whatever. And we're finding a very serious amount of sleep deprivation happening in children. Social deprivation. How ironic that social media is causing social deprivation. What's happening is, what Haidt says is, and I like this statement, he says we've moved from a play-based childhood to a phone-based childhood. Where a lot of kids who used to watch TV in our generation, and we'd get around the TV and be social, they're now taking their devices, their portable devices, and going off by themselves and being alone. Now, I don't want to scare anybody in here today, and this is not about fear-mongering. But you need to know that pornography among young boys is skyrocketing in Canada. And Canada is the 4th leading nation in the world for child pornography. Now we're talking minors. And often it's minors looking at minors, which is pushing it out there more and more and more. And AI is developing more and more and more fake pornography, and you don't even know it's fake. It's on the rise on a lot of children's phones. Serious thing. Boys as young as 9, 10 years old, if their parents give them a cell phone, they can sign on to a social media website, say that they're 13, and be given granted access. So, what we're seeing is serious social deprivation among children. I was in Beijing a couple years ago, and I was on a train with 200 passengers, a subway. My son and I were standing side by side, and it was dead quiet. I'm not exaggerating. 200 people, every single one of them were in the praying mantis mode, playing on their phone, all 200 of them, adults. I could have pickpocketed every person in there, not that I would, but I was in prison after all, and I could have gone and pickpocketed everybody in that crowd because nobody was paying attention to me. So I decided to go find out what they were doing. So I walked around and I looked over people's shoulders. Do you know what they were doing? Men were gaming, women were looking at fashion and videos, and people were doing TikTok. And they were all engaged individually, all alone, nobody talking, not a word. We're seeing that happening in our society, social deprivation. The third area of problem is attention fragmentation. You may have been paying attention as Congress called a number of these Meta, like Mark Zuckerberg and others, to Washington recently to answer to some of the claims of what their social media is doing to children. A whistleblower came out of that just recently. I don't have his name right here. A whistleblower who works at Meta, Facebook, came forward and said this: we design our apps for one thing, to hook and hook and hook and hook and bring addiction to our children. He admitted that we want them not reading long passages, we want them flipping, we want them going from one thing to the next, we want them seeing, we want them engaged in 1 little second, 2 little second, 3 little second, 10 little second videos, and that's it. Because we want them constantly addicted. They know it, but the smoke is rolling in the room and we're looking around and nobody seems to be doing anything or is startled, and we're okay with it. I'm not okay with it. Let me show you why. This comes out of the book. Now, this gray band, understand that social media came in around lightly, 2007, 2008, 2009, but then it went worldwide around 2010 when high-speed internet came in, when the like button came in with Facebook, when the on Twitter had the retweet button, and when the self-facing camera came in and people could do selfies. That all happened around 2010. This graph shows how satisfied boys and girls are with themselves. Look what's happened since 2010. This is the percentage of 8 10th, and 12th grade students who said they were satisfied with themselves. Now remember, children are starting to identify themselves during those stages of development, saying, am I good enough? Am I pretty enough? Am I smart enough? They're looking at that versus their own identity and seeing if they're inferior. What's happening is kids are getting thousands of friends who, if one girl makes one social misplay, can have 5 or 6 other girls coming at her at once saying, she's a slut, she's this, she's this. And what happens? They can have hundreds of people turning against them all at once. They look at these pictures and these images of people who have perfect lives displayed all over the internet, and they become dissatisfied with themselves. This is happening internationally, synchronized, simultaneously. It's not just happening in the US, not just Canada, it's happening in the UK, it's happening in China, it's happening all over the world. Here's another graph. Excellent or very good mental health. This is how Canadian women in Ontario reported that their mental health was either excellent or very good. Look what's happening to 15 to 30-year-olds since 2010. It is plummeting to those people who say they have excellent or very good mental health. Emergency room visits for self-harm have increased 188% in the UK and in the United States since 2010. What is happening all around the world that's causing this epidemic of mental health crisis? Haidt says the cause, not a correlation, the cause is our running toward social media. And we have an epidemic. I think it's a dangerous epidemic. Now I'm only showing you 3 graphs or 4 graphs here, but the research is clearly showing that we have a mental health crisis among our girls and our boys, and nobody is really doing anything about it. 2 additional troubling things. I'm really sorry to do this to you. This is a fact. Number 1, 1 in 18 girls will be approached by an older adult male within 1 week of opening a new social media account. That's a fact. That's the first week. When a girl has a social media account for longer than that, after 8 weeks, it's almost guaranteed that a young teen girl will be followed by an adult male. What's happening in schools, I hope you may have heard about this, but we're seeing now a lot of teen boys asking teen girls to show them pictures of their breasts and send them to them. And it is happening at an alarming rate where boys are pressuring girls to show themselves. Older men who are trying to befriend young teen girls are asking them also to show themselves. There is even pressure from girls to girls. Come on, I've done it, you do it. So this is happening in social media. It is a peer pressure that is causing this terrible vacuum in the minds of kids who are saying, well, what do I do? There's ambiguity, I don't know what to do. Well, when you hear that everyone's doing it, then maybe I should do it. Here's another interesting little thing. TikTok in the United States versus TikTok in China. Who owns TikTok?
China.
China. When you open a TikTok account, you're immediately open with a screen of just videos. What videos populate the TikTok accounts of the United States? TikTok videos about pranking and social unrest, or people who are lighting fires to things and blowing things up. Behaviors that are not socially acceptable crowd until you start to populate with your own things. That's what is already on as a template for American and Canadian TikTok. Do you know what they are in China? Videos about success, about science, about how great China is, about great things people are doing. That's no mistake. Now here's an interesting thing. You may have heard of this survey done a couple years ago, just a couple years ago, where thousands of American teenagers were asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? Have you heard about this one? They asked thousands of Americans, what do you want to be when you grow up? High school students. They also asked thousands of Chinese students, what do you want to be when you grow up? The number 1 answer in China, I want to be an astronaut or a scientist. The number 1 answer in the United States is
YouTube.
an influencer. Now, what people don't know about this study is, the number 2 answer in China is teacher. Do you know what the number 3 answer is? Social media influencer. That has troubled the Chinese government so much that now your cell phone, social media turns off after 4 hours. Now, 4 hours is still a lot. Some people say that's a lot. You know what the average is in Canada? 6 to 7 to 8 to 9, depending on your age. Heavy users can be up to 10 hours. Light users can be 6 hours. Got their phone on, they're going through videos. Hey, look at this video. Hey, look at this. Oh, look at this. We have a lot of our time is being dedicated to this. And people know it, governments know it. So the Chinese government is turning it off after 4 hours. As you know, many schools in Canada, the United States, around the world now are forbidding cell phone use in schools. So, this is bad news. And I don't want to spend too much time on here, and I don't want to be fear-mongering. I am going to start doing parent talks only on social media, starting with another school coming up this year. I'll let you know how it goes, or they'll let you know how it goes, because I really want to have a talk to parents about this and try to see that the smoke coming in the room, they may not be too worried about it, but I would like to alarm people that there are some things that we can do to make it a healthier environment for our kids. So, what can parents do? First thing, I think we need to have a conversation with our kids about social media etiquette. I think you literally need to say to your children, do not accept friend requests from older men. If you don't know the person, why accept them as a friend? I think we need to have these wise conversations. Listen, this is the truth. We used to be really scared when my kids were young about the pervert or the pedophile that hung out near schoolyards. Do you know what the crime rate says? That doesn't even happen anymore. I can't even point to an incident where a child was abducted in Canada or Alberta or the United States in this year. Not very many. The crime rate has dropped. Guess where all the pedophiles and perverts are now? They're online. What we used to watch our kids, making sure that they were safe, so we brought them inside, didn't let them walk home, didn't let them play outside all day anymore. Now we let them online unsupervised. That's where the pedophiles are. So we need to have a conversation with our kids about what's really safe. Here's another thing I would recommend. Not only having conversations with our kids, but I don't think we should allow our kids to take cell phones to bed with them at night. We could set an example and say, Mom and Dad are not taking their cell phones to bed. We're going to charge them all on the kitchen cupboard or the on a table somewhere. Everything stays out. Nothing goes to bed with us. In a recent survey of teenagers, they asked the teenagers, have you talked to your parents lately about your schooling, about your career? 67% of teenagers said, I can't talk to my mom and dad because of social media. They're on their social media too much. That's sobering. So we need to set an example. I would say, we have to say to our children, you cannot take your phone to bed. And one more thing I would recommend is that parents, especially early, need to say, there's only so much social media time you're allowed. Only so much screen time you're allowed. It's hard for parents. Now, I'll tell you what one of my colleagues did. He was so concerned with how much time he was spending on social media that he ditched his phone and got a flip phone. Because he can only text one person at a time, and there's no videos and stuff. He has saved hours. So what Haidt recommends, which a lot of people say, you gotta be crazy. And the only reason they say you gotta be crazy because they're not used to it. Nobody has said anything. He said, don't let your kids have a smartphone until they're 16. Give them a flip phone instead. Now that's hard. Can you imagine? Haidt recently surveyed a group of teenagers that he was speaking to at a high school, and he said, how many of you would be willing to give up your phones and go to a flip phone? Guess how many of the crowd of 1,000 said they'd do it? 0. A young girl asked, are you saying that everybody has to do it? He said, yes. If everybody was required to give up their cell phone and go to the flip phone, how many of you would do it? Guess how many answered? All of them. Because they said, we know it's harming us, we know it's dangerous, but nobody else is doing it, so I won't. See, the smoke is coming in the room, but the kids don't know enough to get up and leave because that's what their friends are doing. Peer pressure is so strong. Their identity is being formed through their social groups, yes?
It does make it hard too, because I feel like we're so reliant on our phones. Like,
Yes.
my husband and I talk about flip phones all the time, but then like our GPS and, like you're going to Calgary and you don't know where it is. It's like it's Google Maps, you're gonna print it out again, like,
I agree with
2
you.
years ago.
I think the
So,
adults
like-
should have the cell phone.
Absolutely, it's just like we like, go make motions to do that, and then we're like, cell phone companies have made us reliant on having Wi-Fi, you need it now.
Yep.
and
Absolutely. In
so-
fact, somebody asked me when I was talking about this, well, why did you give yourself a cell phone and a smartphone? I said, because I didn't want my kids to be ostracized as the weird kids without a phone. Right? That's why I gave them a phone, so they could be like everybody else. You know, a few years ago, the number of kids smoking was way up here. Now it's way down here. The first thing that the government did was legislate against vending machines giving cigarettes. They outlawed vending machines, and kids could only buy cigarettes if they showed their ID at a store. The number of kids using cigarettes went right down. All he's calling for, is there something we can do to limit the amount of cell phone use? It's a wonderful tool. We all know how great a tool it is. But any tool can be used improperly. And so we need to teach ourselves how to use the tool well. And I think parents and schools and government needs to set the agenda there. And so some schools are starting to say, okay, no cell phones in schools. And I know some people say, well, it's a great tool. Yes, it is. But we were okay without it 25 years ago. We can be okay without it now. That's just my opinion.
Do you think that there's a particular harm in making your kids those weirdos without phones? Because that's my plan, honestly.
I do know that kids, I try not to ostracize my own kids on purpose. And yet, my kids were the kids that didn't always have the $400 pair of shoes and stuff like that, because I would just say to my kids, no, you're not gonna have that, no, you're not gonna do that, no, you're gonna, and I delayed it as much as possible. It was tough on them. They'll tell you, it was tough, Dad, because I had to wear this or this or this. And I think that's a real concern, and I don't know the answer to that. That's a part of parenting that I think is very difficult. I think small communities could create a movement. No phones in schools between the hours of this and this. Leave phones home. Don't even bring them to school because they'll use them on the playground. And maybe one small thing like that could make a change. Could start a ball rolling. But you're right. It's hard for a parent to know that their kid's going to get picked on because they don't have what everybody else has. We give in to peer pressure too, as parents. So that's the first thing. Now, I didn't expand on that, and we didn't come into a lot of solutions, and we didn't go a lot of directions in this, but I think we said enough on that. We can still talk about that after. I'd recommend this book. It's hard to go to sleep after you start reading this book, I'll tell you right now. All right, let's get back to our brain, and we'll talk a little bit about, as I said, we are very easily manipulated. And I talk to my students all the time, they're pre-service teachers, and I say, is it easy to manipulate a human being? And of course, we all know the answer to that. Yes, it's very easy to manipulate a human being. It's very easy to manipulate children. We're very easily influenced, and it matters because we don't want our kids to be influenced in the wrong way. Mindset. This is one of the strongest predictors of how well your children will do as adults, is the type of mind and how it's set. And I think parents play a big role in setting the child's mind, as do teachers. So, let me ask you, how do your children view learning? Like the process of having to learn. You heard Willingham say that we don't like to think, and yet we bring them in schools and it's all about thinking, a lot about thinking. They don't like it. But what do you think, how do they view learning? How do your kids view learning? Now, if they're really young, I can't wait to learn to read, can't wait to, well, what happens when it starts to get difficult? When reading starts to get hard, when math starts to get hard. Let me ask you, out of this crowd, how many of you would say, yeah, I'm not a math person? Why? It got hard, and then you figured, well, I can't do that. You know, we grow up sometimes, and people say this to you, you are so smart. Teachers do this all the time because we want to encourage kids, of course. We say, you're so smart, you're a natural, you're really good at this, oh my goodness, you're good. Then when things get hard, what do? See, we're industrious, and we think, hey, I'm good at this, I'm good at this. But then when things get hard, we change our mind on it, and we say, I guess I'm not that smart. I guess I don't really know what I'm doing. I guess I'm not good at math. Okay, that's it. I'm not good at math. And that's all a myth. Now, you're lucky, because I was going to ask you to do a diagram for me, and I do this at my teacher workshops. I get all the teachers to to take a picture of himself and then draw a portrait of themselves and have it on their desk so I can see who they are. And they all draw a self-portrait. So I didn't get you to do that because I was nice to you. And they come up with various works of art. And I asked them, how many of you think you could be an artist? Especially after seeing their work, very few will say, I could be an artist. So a couple years ago, I had the opportunity to visit North Korea, where my son works. And this is the classroom that I visited. This is a grade 5 classroom, and you see the 2 leaders on the wall up ahead. All along the side of the wall, they have sayings about how great they are as a country, how hard work produces results, how your personal efforts will help you advance, blah, 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 right? We call this Juche philosophy. And that's what this leader, the father, actually produced the Juche philosophy. And a lot of people actually go to North Korea to study the Juche philosophy, which is self-sufficiency. And that's why if this nation competed against other countries, they probably would blow everybody away. They do schooling 6 days a week, and they do it from like 7 in the morning to 4 or 5 in the afternoon. And then some of them want to do extracurricular activities, and so they go to what's called Children Palace, and they take extracurricular activities. Believe it or not, they love the accordion. I don't know what is wrong with that nation, but they love it. So everywhere we went, somebody would be playing this thing, and they'd be singing, and they would sing songs to us. They love to sing, they love to smile. What do you not notice in that classroom?
The teacher.
What?
I don't even notice the teacher, it's all them.
Gadgets,
Mm.
no technology.
No cell phones, no water.
No primary colors other than red.
Yeah, nothing on the wall.
No
In fact,
distractions.
5 of them, what's that?
There's really no distractions.
No distractions, that's right, very simple. Whiteboards, the TV, now, it does work, but sometimes because power is a thing, sometimes it doesn't work so well. You have to hook it up to a car battery to get it work. But they do have intranet, which is generated by their own people, for their own people, and they make sure that they actually pick and choose what their population looks at and is exposed to. But in school, they take it very seriously. That's a pretty big class. You will have no discipline problems in North Korea. At all. None. They were the happiest, most delightful people I've ever met. And touching. They are hugging. And men hold hands there because they just want to touch. They're very affectionate. They love their families. Now, they also love to learn. And they think in terms of, I love to learn. Learning is a ticket. They don't think in terms of getting out of the country. They think of feeding their families and doing well and making their families proud, making their country proud. And so they go to places like this. This is art, the art class, and this is a 10-year-old girl. Do you think she's good?
A little bit.
Was she born that way? She was not. You know, Tiger Woods was not born a golfer. Connor Bedard was not born a hockey player. She was not born an artist. Now, does she have a different brain than you and me? Yes, absolutely. She was taught that way. She became it. But a lot of people say, oh, I could never do that. That's not the right thing to say. That's not the right mindset. You cannot do that yet. But you could with proper training. And a woman who wanted to prove it was Betty Edwards. Now, I've asked you, do you think you could become a great artist? This is an actual self-portrait. Then this woman went to Betty Edwards drawing school. Now, Betty Edwards was an American high school art teacher, and she taught that art, drawing, is not a magical form. It's not something that only certain people can do with certain talents. She said anyone can learn to draw. All you need to do is take this complex task, break it down into its teachable component parts. I know you don't believe you could draw, but you'll see here in a minute. She says if you can teach people to see contours, to see shapes, to see shadows, to see relationships, to see depth, and you teach them this complex task broken down into its teachable component parts, anyone can learn to do anything. Now you're still doubting. So watch. This is an actual profile that the woman did her best job. After 5 classes, this is the result. 5 classes. These are not young people. 5 classes. What's happening? She literally changed their mind about how learning occurs. One of the most famous writers in our last several years is Carol Dweck, who's from Stanford University. She wrote this famous book on mindset. She wants people to see that learning is a change over time, that really small incremental steps can cause learning to happen. This is what teachers try to do. We try to convince children that you can learn anything if you just would be patient, because it's going to take time. How we view this process has a gigantic effect on how successful our futures will be. If you don't believe it, you say, it's never going to happen, then it may not happen for you. But if you know that learning happens in small steps and it requires effort, you can learn anything. When you were born, your brain was capable of learning all the languages on the planet, all 3,800 of them. Any one of them. If I put you in a Chinese home, you would learn to speak Chinese. If I put you in whatever home, you would learn to speak that. Your brain was capable. But we somehow taught ourselves that because I can't do it, I won't do it. We're just not there yet. This is a true study I'm about to show you. It's a math study. Before we get there, let me just say this, set it up. It was a study done in a university, first year math, Math 1000. The professor knew he was going to teach 2 groups, group blue, group red, group A, group B. 200 students in this class, 200 students in this class. I'm going to teach them exactly the same way, Math 1000, first year university. I'll walk in, use the same slides, teach this class, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, then 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, I teach this class. I'll teach them the exact same way. So you got the study? Now they did pre-tests to make sure that they were equal, and they divided the students equally in both these conditions. Now the guy's going to do the exact same thing, 2 classes in a row. Nothing changes. You got that? First week he teaches this, teaches this. Then he gives a test. So he gave an easy test because he wanted to make sure that they did well and they stayed in the course. So all of them were getting 85, 90%, and the averages were like 80 to 85, 89%. They blew it out of the water. He says, congratulations, it was a great test. That's all he said. Then he continued teaching, taught for 2 more weeks. Then he gave them a test on purpose that would destroy them. Because he knew, it was part of the study, he wanted to destroy their confidence. So he gave them a test, and look what happened. The average was 10% and 12%. And in universities, you can actually, when you know you're going to do poor, you can actually drop out of that class and get your money back, or at least a portion of it. But before they did that, they had an emergency meeting, and they asked all the students to stay in the class, see it through. So they said to this group, the blue group, they said, math is innate. You are either born with math ability, math intelligence, or you're not. If you're not, it sucks to be you. I'm sorry, but it's you either have it or you don't. To the other group, this is what they said. Now remember, they're all right here. They're all devastated. To the red group, they said, now listen, math is a learned skill. You can learn it. You may need to study more. You may need to get a tutor. You may need to come in after hours and come in and take a second class. You may need to take the feedback I give you and study extra hard or work extra hard or do extra problems. But if you do the work, you will learn the material. Now remember, he's not saying just adopt a growth mindset or like a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. He's not saying just adopt it and it'll magically happen. He's saying no. If you understand that you can learn, but it's going to be hard work, then you'll put into place the behaviors that will help you learn. And that's exactly what happened. He again taught them the exact same way, said nothing to them, gave them test 3, gave them test 4. Those who believed that math is learned, that's what their scores were at the end of the semester. Those who believed that math was innate, what they believed actually came out into their behaviors. Now, that group was really ticked off when they found out it was a study, and they gave them a free course afterwards. Now, this is called attribution theory. So when you attribute or give reason for your success or failure, if you give it to ability, I'm born this way, I'm not very intelligent, I'm not very smart, I'm not a math person, I'm not an artist. When you attribute it to born ability, innate ability, which is incorrect, it's uncontrollable, you don't feel responsible, nothing I can do about it. There is shame and embarrassment. People say, yeah, I'm stupid, I'm dumb, I can't do it, and they're embarrassed by it. but they withdraw and their performance declines. And it demotivates them because I can do nothing about it. But when your children know that, oh yes you can, it's actually two things. It's correct strategy use or correct knowledge plus effort. When they attribute that to their success, it's controllable, they're responsible for it. They will feel guilt because they'll say, yeah, I didn't study, I should have studied, I failed because I didn't give effort, I didn't work hard enough. They know they're responsible for their actions. It actually increases engagement and performance improves. Helping our children know what to attribute their success or failure to is very important. Teachers try to do this all the time, and they try to say, look, get away from this fixed mindset. That's a myth. You have to have a growth mindset. You will attain the level to which you work hard and ask for help, and I give you extra help. It's true, some kids are going to need more help than others. That's absolutely true. What happens is some kids turn off long before they actually follow through. So we have to make sure, as I said with my prison kids, one of my goals was always to put wins under their belts, to make sure they win. And I made them successful. And I just pulled them along with work that was just slightly harder than they were able to do, and then I showed them how to do it. They were successful, that motivated them. Then they got successful again, that motivated them. So what can parents do? I think the number one thing is to talk to your kids about what do you think about your abilities? Do you realize that you can do it if you work hard? Now young children, like I've heard from you, they already think they can do it probably. But when they get to that part where they say, I can't do it anymore, you say, not yet. You're frustrated because it's gotten hard. Of course it's gotten hard. Learning is hard. So I'm here to help you. We'll get you the support you need, but if you show extra work and extra effort, you will learn this material. Parents actually, I hate the word coddle because it's not coddling. Parents actually serve to comfort discouraged children. So important. Especially dads. When we comfort our kids and we say, you know what, this is really hard. You've told me that you're so frustrated you're not going to be able to do this. I believe you can do it. And I'm going to help you. And I'm going to help you see it through it. Not going to be easy. It wasn't easy for me. It won't be easy for you. But I'll help you. We can go a long way in changing the mindset that kids have. Thirdly, what about their inner speech? I say to my students all the time, we all hear voices. We all do. We all hear voices. It depends on which voices we listen to. I say to my students, pre-service teachers all the time, I say, stop listening and start talking to yourself. Don't listen to all the messages that come out there because they don't have your good in mind. Start talking to yourself about what's actually good for you. So start directing your inner speech. Let me give you an example. Lev Vygotsky, who was a Russian psychologist, used to say that inner speech actually directs behavior. So self-direction actually occurs because of inner speech. Let me illustrate. This actually happened to me recently. If you've been on University Drive at all in Lethbridge, you'll know that there's a lot of deer who live on both sides of University Drive, and they run across on a regular basis. Well, my father-in-law was a woodsman from northern New Brunswick, and we used to go visit all the time in northern New Brunswick. I'm from New Brunswick, my wife's from New Brunswick. And so one day we were driving along, and up ahead in Miramichi, we saw these deer run across the road. And he said to me, now listen, Chris, listen very carefully. When you see deer run across the road, do not look where the deer are going. The way deer behave is they don't stop and turn around and go back. They've gone across the road, they'll stay there. Don't look where they went. Look where they came from, because there's always another deer who lags behind. That's the one you'll hit. Well, sure enough, that inner speech, which was driven into me, changed my behavior. It directed my behavior. Just the day before yesterday, I'm driving down, and I'm in the lead of all these cars because I was the first at the light. So we're zooming down, and I see all these deer cross ahead of me, and I could hear my father-in-law. And as I looked over to the median, there was another deer ready to jump. And so I slowed down, and sure enough, that deer crossed the road. I would have hit it. This is what inner speech does for our children. It directs their behavior. We do this all the time, don't we? We say to our kids, don't do this because you'll get hurt. Don't look both ways when you cross the street. Do this. So we try to put inner script, healthy scripts, into their head that they repeat because it'll direct their behavior. That's what parents do. Yeah.
Is that the same as affirmations?
Yes, absolutely.
It says that
Yes.
positive.
Exactly. So when my son or daughter says things like, "Ah, I'm so ugly," who told you you're ugly? And I have conversations with my kids and I say, who said you were ugly? Well, no. What do you say? And what do mom and dad say? And so we started putting affirmation and good scripts in their head about their abilities, about what they can do in life, how they can contribute, all these different types of positive affirmations. So I tell them, don't listen to the voices, start speaking to yourself. It's so important to learning. And I could ask you, what words does your child use to describe themselves as a learner? Now, before I asked you about the mindset, what do they think about learning? But now I want to know what they think about themselves as learners. How many of you ever heard this? I hate math. You know what? Children don't hate math. They hate how math makes them feel. It's just numbers and math and formulas. It's not that they hate. It's, I feel stupid. I feel dumb. I can't do that. Johnny can do it. I can't do it. He's smart. I'm stupid. I wasn't born. So the inner speech that they play over is actually not true. It's based on how they feel. Now this is important, and I'll take you to the brain for this. So if I was to cut your brain in half, which I wouldn't do, I would see this. And here's the neat thing. Everything you've heard tonight, everything you smell, everything you see, everything you feel sitting on those hard chairs, all of it comes in through your nerve endings, and it comes in centrally to what's called your central nervous system, and it comes in through your brainstem. Everything goes in through your brainstem. Now, your brain is designed to be like a food processor without the top on. It's supposed to go in through your brainstem and blah, just like that. It's supposed to like explode out to the outer cerebral cortex. That's where things travel. It also travels internally, but originally and first, it's supposed to go to the outer parts of your brain, where it travels at 500 kilometers an hour, which is that small little space, instantaneous, among 80 to 100 billion neurons. This little area here is also full of neurons, and it's a thing called the reticular activating system, which is this cluster of neurons that has these primary jobs. It's what wakes you up in the morning. It also helps you to focus on what's important. So if you're walking through the woods late at night by yourself and you hear a crack, what do? You know, your head turns. That's your reticular activating system. It's designed to protect you. Now, if you've ever seen, okay, I have to make an admission here, it's terrible. I do go on social media, and I do look at videos that are silly. And one of my favorite videos for some unknown reason is when people pull pranks on people, and they scare them. I see three reactions. Like I'll see a guy will walk in, and this guy will jump out as a ghost. What does he do? He either screams and runs, or he'll freeze. I don't know about you, but I freeze. Or I've even seen him when he punches, right? So what we call that, of course, and you know this is your fight, flight, or freeze mechanism. Because this part of the brain is your motion, that's what's all responsible for your actions and your movement. So if things stay in the lower part of the brain, what we call the reactive brain, those information bits are not going to the cognitive brain where thinking occurs. See, people are reacting here. And we don't want kids always to react against a negative social media post or something somebody says. We want them thinking, but it's hard to be logical in the face of emotion. But this is where emotion sits right here. Let me bring up Judy Willis for you. She's another great cognitive scientist, and here's what she says. During stress or fear or embarrassment, the RAS filter gives intake preference to input considered relevant to the perceived threat. So a teacher asks me to do something, and I'm, oh crap, I'm going to look dumb. I'm going to look dumb. And so what do kids do when they think they're going to look dumb? Passive-aggressive behavior. I'm not going to do it. Why do they not want to do it? Do they hate the teacher? No. Do they hate math? No. They hate how it makes them feel, and they don't want to be embarrassed. So they shut down. They won't think. They won't even apply themselves. Unless the perception of threat is reduced, the brain persists in doing its primary job, protecting you from harm. It will stay in the fight, fright, and freeze mode. And you will not see good thinking or learning. The things that we want kids to engage in and pay attention to and think about, not going to happen. a guy, a great researcher by a great name, I love it, Jeffrey Canada, Dr. Jeffrey Canada, was speaking at a conference one time, and he went up to a guy and he says, what do you think would be the effect if I come up to you and I said, you wait until after work, buddy, when you get to the parking lot, I'm gonna beat your, he actually used effing, I'm gonna beat your head in, and you walk away. Do you think that guy's gonna have a productive day today? What he thinking about? He's thinking about the parking lot. His mind is in the parking lot because of that threat. We have kids every day feeling that, maybe not to that extent, but they don't want to be embarrassed, they're worried, maybe they get a little bullied, or maybe they're ashamed, they don't want people to see that they can't do it, a whole other range. And so they avoid going deep in thinking, and they stay in the reactive part of the brain. During fear, sadness, and again embarrassment and anger, neural activity is evident in the lower brain, and the reflective cognitive brain, especially the prefrontal cortex, does not receive the sensory input of important items such as the content of the day's lessons. Yes?
This is, like, I saw the book of The Whole Brain Child.
Yep.
So this is like very similar as to what he talks about. Would you like agree with some of the methods that he would kind of introduce to parents to keep them from being in the lower base brain, more of like, I'm just assuming that maybe you like that book? 'Cause it's
I have not read the book.
You have not read the book?
I have not read
Okay.
that book. So tell me some of them.
I don't really remember what the suggestions are, but it talks about the whole brain child and basically that to keep them to actually be productive, they can't stay in that lower brain
That's
kind
right.
of fight, flight, or freeze. So
Right.
like, here are some suggestions as
Yes.
to how to do that. I don't remember what they are, but we have to, and basically when they're in that, they can't learn. So basically if they're having a meltdown, they're in that lower brain.
Yep.
And so when they're in that lower brain, you can't actually teach them
That's
anything. And so saying like, you know,
Yeah.
like, hey Billy, like, you're not doing this, and this is what you need to do is actually null and void.
That's right.
because they cannot act, they have to come out of that.
I hope everybody online heard that, because so I also teach behavior at the university, and one thing that we have is we have what's called the acting out behavior cycle. The child's calm, but then they get triggered, and they start to activate and get agitated. When they reach the peak near a crisis, there is no sense trying to reason with them or anything. Your goal is safety around children and their safety, and then give them a place to calm down. Only after a child actually reduces and they're calm again, can then you speak to them. Now, we're not there yet with some of these things in school, but you're right. That lower brain is reacting and it's not logical. We're actually going through a brainstorm right now and it's not ready to learn. However, before we get to that, there are some things that we can do to fool the RAS, the reticular activating system, to get things through. One is the brain does like curiosity. So, for instance, I'm going to call out to Mr. McQuaid again. My grade 7 classroom, science classroom, one day we walked in, imagine a group of boys and girls, grade 7, walking into a grade 7 classroom, and every desk has a candle on it that's lit. He was pretty brave. We walked in, noisy, laughing, everything. We came in. What do you think the reaction was of every student when we walked in that room? Interest. We all got quiet and we're all like, what's going on here? Novelty is a very good thing to get through the reticular activating system. Something new that a teacher does, poses an interesting, provocative question, poses a problem that needs to be solved, a new image that's put up there that's a provocative, funny image, and you're like, ooh, what is that about, right? Something provocative gets the brain to go, wait, what's going on here? And it gets kind of like fooled, and we camouflage learning. Another thing is humor. Humor does a really good job of getting through the reticular activating system. So a teacher who uses humor wisely, not too much, not too little, but uses it wisely, can get somebody going, oh yeah, I never thought of that, right? Another one is stories. We can pack so much information in a good story. And I think that's why Indigenous ways of learning is such an important area for us to explore more and more. Storytelling. Kids remember stories. They hook it onto their prior knowledge, and they start to remember it. And another thing is continue to make connections to children's prior knowledge and what interests them is another way to get it through the RAS. Those are just 4 ways to get it through. But you're absolutely right, when a child is in a state of trauma or excitability like that, you have to wait. Problem is, some of the classrooms aren't set up for, okay, Jonathan, would you go over and have a nap or go away for a few minutes? Right? It doesn't happen. So some teachers have things set up in the room where they have rest chairs and stuff like that, and kids know how to use those things too. They can manipulate the situation, but.
The cheat code is food.
What's that?
The cheat code is food. You can't be in a state of dysregulation and eat. So that's a real good cheat code. If kids
Someone
are
make it
ever-
always want snacks?
Could be. If
Snacks
you're
are
ever
good.
dysregulated and you need kids to regulate, get them to eat.
And so are fidget toys and things that stimulate other parts of the body, like fidget toys and things can actually get them to calm down quicker. Food, like you say, having food gets you to think, oh, this is food. Your brain actually switches gears onto things that are pleasurable. And that's another thing to get things through, is a pleasurable activity actually lets things get through the RAS, because we like to do pleasurable things. So, this is what teachers try to do all the time, establish a safe and exploratory environment where mistakes and error are a normal part of learning. That is hard. Creating a classroom where you say, this is like a learning lab. In fact, I saw a video even today where they said that maybe you should consider that 4/5 of the assignment that you give kids, they're not worth any marks at all. Or, like that's at a university level, in school, we do a lot of things that just aren't worth anything all the time. There should be a whole bunch of low stakes or no stakes stuff given out to kids all the time. Exploring. Make as many mistakes as you want, because mistakes are good. Now, I have a number in my PowerPoint on my notes. The number is, and by the way, this is a bit of folk myth. We don't even know if it's real, but it is said that Edison made so many mistakes to make the light bulb. There's different numbers. There's 2,000, 1,000, 4,377 is another one. Somebody asked him, how does it feel to have made thousands of mistakes when you made the light bulb? And he said, apparently, I didn't make all those mistakes making a light bulb. I just discovered ways of not to make a light bulb. Those mistakes were ways of not to do it. That's what I discovered. Now, don't you wish all of us could learn that way and we were okay with mistakes? That needs to be taught.
Do you think that there is an element where the stakes are just too high constantly with too much risk to it?
Very good point. When a child's learning to read and they can't read, maybe they have a learning disability in the area of reading, and they're just not getting to coding and they're not figuring it out, and they truly, truly do have a learning disability, we won't get into all of why that occurs, they can get to the point where they say, I'm not seeing progress, even the hard as I am working, there's something wrong. Then teachers recognize that and have to give compensatory strategies and workarounds where they can say, you know what, this computer's going to read this for you, because I want you to be part of the thinking, part of the novel study, so the computer will do that for you, and that's okay. So we have to be smart about this. We don't have it all figured out yet. If we did, we'd all be rich. But you know what? We're still trying to figure out ways, and the good news is that we're individuals. All of your children are individuals, and we don't want them all to be exactly the same and learn the same way. We all do share the same cognitive architecture in the brain, but we all learn because of context and all the influences. We all learn at different rates and different ways. And so yes, it is true. There can be so much failure that the history builds up and a kid says, I cannot do it anymore. And that child needs special help.
Do you think that also there's a point at home where our reaction, like the whole idea of don't spill over spilt milk, like instead just like we show them, you just clean up, it's not a big deal, but our response, whether it's from our own stress or from whatever, that can also do that mindset shift and can be where it's like you make any mistake, you're in trouble at home, therefore then we see it in the schools, we see it in their peer groups, we see that the RAS just like going crazy.
Guilty as charged. I remember one time, sounds silly, my middle son and I were out backyard building a snowman. He was probably 8 years old, 10 years old. And he wasn't doing it like I thought he should do it. And I said, David, would you change that and do it this way or something? And he dropped his mittens and said, I give up. I can't please you. And he marched in the house. Now, he won't admit it, but that had an effect on him even later in life, where he said, I don't know if I can please Dad. Now, that hurts. But even, you know what it's like If you're married or you have a partner and they say one word, oh, that can hurt and it can sting for a long time. So yes, it's hard to say, isn't it? Like sometimes things go off the back, just like water off a duck, and it doesn't seem to bother some kids, and some of us, one word sets us off. Yeah.
Do you think, coupled with that, I had looked at a book, but I didn't read it all.
You're like the rest of us, yeah.
College all over.
Pardon?
It's like college.
Yeah, so we went to college together.
Did not read that whole thing.
Did not read
Did not read that one.
It was talking about how we've given our children so many, what was it called? I can't remember. So many rewards. Do you know what book I'm talking about?
No, but I know where you're going with it. It's like everything we do, we give a kid a gold medal.
We've over-rewarded our children into having any stamina.
I believe that's true. I believe that we've gotten into rewarding kids, trying to motivate them with rewards.
Right.
Whereas if we could reward them with true success, we can actually set the bar very high and then provide ladders for them to get up to reach that goal. You know what? Our kids know when they're being given a free gold medal. They know it.
Right.
And they'll say to their friends, I got a gold medal, but it isn't worth anything. So we do a disservice when we think we're motivating with rewards. Motivation has to be intrinsic, and that has to be earned. Now we have to be careful, of course, how we do that. We try to be as gentle as we can, and we make mistakes, but motivation, success is what determines motivation, not the other way around. Let me just demonstrate that. That's really good. Let me show you something. Student belief guides self-talk. We know that. The actual belief, what they actually believe, you should have a conversation with them about what they actually believe. That will guide their self-talk. Self-talk guides their action. Now, fear, anxiety, embarrassment, especially in making mistakes or not knowing, is linked to how good they are and how worthwhile they feel. Right back to those stages of development. If they feel that their mistakes actually define how worthwhile they are, then mistakes are bad. So we have to change that script for children to say, mistakes are just mistakes. We all make them. And if you don't make mistakes, then you're not from this planet. So welcome and join the rest of us as we make lots of mistakes. Because actually, mistake making is actually better for you than not making mistakes. Now, B.F. Skinner, who is a famous behavioralist, he taught errorless learning. He actually believed that we should not allow children to make mistakes because they'll get in a rut. He was wrong. We actually know from cognitive neuroscience now that actually allowing kids to make predictions and make mistakes and then correcting the mistakes, the learning actually goes deeper in their memory than if they hadn't made the mistake at all. So making mistakes actually serves to deepen and embed the learning much deeper in long-term memory. So mistakes are good. We somehow have to start in kindergarten and preschool to teach our kids that mistake making and exploration is really wonderful. Somehow we have to get the kids to believe that. And we got to make it cool in high school and make it cool in middle school to make mistakes.
Making it cool for middle school.
What's that?
Making it cool for middle school.
Yeah, making it cool for middle school. Now, I wanted to bring you to this. Tim Seifert's a good friend of mine. Tim is at Memorial University. He did this study a few years ago that I thought was brilliant. He was watching these play parks, these skating parks, and kids were out there skateboarding, and they'd be out there for week after week after week, and he would see them. They'd be falling, they'd have bruises and scrapes and cuts. And so he wanted to find out one day, wanted to do a research study. So as a researcher, he went to the skate park and he said to them, why? Like, why are you doing this? Look at you. You're bruised and you're cut. Why do you do this? You're making thousands of mistakes. Why do you keep going? And so he did a formal study, and it's called Skateboarding in Flow, a great study, Seiffert 2009. The truth is, these kids realized this is hard, and they accepted it. It was part of what it is. And here's what they said. Success is built up through little triumphs, and I can live vicariously through my friends. My friends are doing it, and they're making thousands of mistakes, so it's okay. And every time I get it right, I hear the whole crowd go, whoa, you did it. Even though it's one little tiny thing right. I landed it. And the next time I screw up, fall over. And he wanted to know, what keeps you going? You know what kept them going? They understood the game. They understood that skateboarding is hard. They understood it's filled with mistakes. They understood that errors are part of the process. But if they keep at it, they're going to learn. Gamers know that too. The hardest game in the world right now is called Elden Ring. Have you heard of it? When Elden Ring was designed, some of the people went to the designers and said, the actual creator of it, said, I think you're making a mistake. It's too hard. He said, nope. I want this game to be so hard that they have to join a social group in order to
get
solve
through
the
it.
problem. And guess what? There are large social groups trying to solve Elden Ring. I've met several people who have played it and they love it. Guess what? You die thousands of times. Even expert gamers die over and over and over, just the slightest move. Now I'd get discouraged and I'd quit. But gamers, no way. They know the game. And so he said, it takes you like 120 hours to master it if you're a good gamer. At Christmas time, it had sold 12 million copies in its first month. And it was online to become the most successful game of all times. You know why? Because they knew. You had a question?
Just something about hardship. There's something great that comes out of hardship, the journey itself.
Absolutely, if you understand it.
Exactly.
But in school, there's a lot of unwritten rules, and kids somehow believe they're supposed to know all this stuff because we're being graded on it, right? And so by the end of the year, you better know it all. So when they struggle, they don't see hardship as something to be welcomed. They see it as, let's avoid that, make sure I get my good grades.
That's right.
Boys, I wish, that's just me, I wish K to 6 was a gradeless learning lab. But people don't usually listen to me, so what can parents do? Let's finish with this. I really think we have to have a conversation with our children and say, honey, what do you think about your brain? What do you think about learning? What do you think about mistakes? What do you think about it when you make a mistake? Do you think I'm upset? Are you upset? Are your friends upset? Do you care about this? What kind of voice do you have in your head around learning, around mistakes, around growing, all of these types of things? These conversations that we have with our children actually matter. Because believe it or not, especially in those 2 early stages, especially in the first stage of in industry versus inferiority, you are the primary one who actually provides that strength and stability for your children, and we know that. Our kids are listening. This is a time for us to put that inner script in our kids' heads in a way that actually sets them on a path, like making mistakes is okay. I'm not there yet. I can do this. I can learn basically anything if I put my mind to it and I work hard. And that's important. Telling them that effort is important. What we call effortful learning or desirable difficulty is important for kids to adopt in their script, because if they believe it and they act on it and they know they're not there yet, it goes a long way of helping them deal with failure. So with that, I'm going to say thank you. You've been a great audience. This talk always goes over time, and I know we could go on and talk and talk and talk. And so for those that joined us online, thank you very much. Those who watched us afterwards, thank you very much. If you'd like to contact me, if you have any questions by email, please feel free to do that. Just make sure you get 2 L's in my name or it won't get through to me. And you can also check out goodteaching.ca, and there are some free resources on there for anybody who wishes to look at them. So thank you. Thank you very much. Turn it off, and if you have any questions, and I have some handouts for you on growing up digital, there's a couple things there, and then a parent